Okay, hello and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this AIST Young Professionals webinar. My name is Lauren Beltry and I'm a marketing administrator here at AIST. I also have the pleasure of running our Young Professionals program. I hope everyone is doing well and excited for a valuable training this afternoon. In today's session, we'll be diving into the topic, navigating difficult conversations. There are dozens of books on the topic of challenging and important conversations. Those times when you know you should have a difficult conversation with your spouse, your partner, your coworker, maybe your client, but you don't. Maybe you fear that talking will just make things worse. So you feel stuck and you'd really like to free up that energy for more useful purposes. In this interactive session, international speaker and author Jeff Tobe will dive into the 6 strategies for having that meaningful conversation. These include how to prepare for the conversation, having a goal in mind but remaining flexible, becoming an active listener, taking care of yourself, how to brainstorm ideas together, and how to empathize and coach. I hope you're all looking forward to this presentation as much as I am. Before we get started, I just need to go through a few important housekeeping reminders for everyone. First up, our antitrust guidelines. Please take a moment to read through the bullet points on your screen. AIST's antitrust guidelines emphasize the law that prohibits agreements between 2 or more individuals or businesses to regulate prices or quantities of goods and services, to allocate customers or territories, to limit a competitor operations, or otherwise unreasonably restrain business activity. Everyone who participates in any AIST activity must follow these guidelines. I also want to brief you on our anti-harassment policy. Please take another few moments to read the text on your screen. AIST's anti-harassment policy emphasizes the importance to provide a harassment-free environment regardless of age, race, religion, disability, or gender. All right, a few more notes for our attendees. Your audio has been disabled, and if you'd like to ask any questions to the presenter, please do so using the question and answer feature in Zoom. Assuming we'll have enough time to get to those at the end, both myself and our moderator for today will determine which ones are asked to our speaker. Our presenter for today is also hoping to utilize the chat or Q&A feature in Zoom to stir up some audience engagement and connection. So please do contribute in the Q&A feature in Zoom to those conversations when asked. Our session today is being recorded and it'll be available to AIST members in the coming weeks on our website. You'll just have to simply log in to access that content. And last, if you have any technical difficulties at all during this webinar, please email memberservices@aist.org. And with that, I'd like to now officially introduce our moderator for today, Kelsey Farrow. Kelsey is a dedicated YP with a passion for innovation in the steel industry. With a strong foundation in steelmaking, metallurgy, and a keen focus on innovative practices, she thrives at the intersection of technical expertise and practical application. Currently working at Opta Group USA, Farrow leverages a deep understanding of steel processes, including casting technologies, slag chemistry, and secondary metallurgy, to deliver impactful solutions. A recent graduate of the Colorado School of Mines, she's committed to professional growth and continuously seeks opportunities to refine her knowledge and contribute to advancements in steelmaking. Farrow has also cultivated firsthand industry insights, including internships with Nucor Yamato, Elwood Quality Steels, and Caterpillar, further broadening her expertise. Farrow is actively involved with AIST as she serves as the YP chair for the Continuous Casting Technology Committee and as the Programming Subcommittee chair for our new YP membership committee. Kelsey, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, again, my name is Kelsey. Today we were joined by the lovely Jeff Tobe, backed by popular demand. You may recall last year's webinar, for many of you that were able to attend it, in which he led us on one communication path, and today he'll lead us on another. Jeff is a professional speaker, author, and trainer. He's got lots of skills. His newest book, The CX Edge: How to Attract, Wow, and Keep Customers, is one of the top-selling books on the market. His newest online course, Mastering Communication Skills, is scheduled for release this summer. Jeff is an avid Pittsburgh Steelers fan, a disappointed Toronto Maple Leafs fan, sorry, and a hopeful grandpa. One of his daughters is expecting their first baby in August. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And hi, everyone. I believe that we had some technical challenges. Lauren, I just want to check in that we will not be using the chat box. We'll just use the Q&A, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's just as I ask questions throughout my presentation, please just put your answers into the Q&A, not into the chat. We're just having challenges that we can't see the chat box. If you just remember to do that, and then we'll sort through what questions there are and the answers to, the answers, I'm trying to do two things at once here, to any of the questions I had. There we go. I just want to make sure one more time, Lauren or Kelsey, you can just see my slides.
Yep, you're all set.
All right, good. Well, everybody, thank you. And thank you so much for being here and for taking the time. I'm so excited to be back. And yes, I'd like to say now, I am expecting a grandchild. I had nothing to do with it and will have nothing to do with it. No, I don't mean it that way until it's born, but I'm very excited. That's all. And so just a little bit, as Kelsey and Lauren both mentioned, and I'm trying to stumble through is I'm going to be asking questions throughout my presentation. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. And in the Q&As, would you just put where you're dialing in from? Well, that's old, right? Where you're calling in from? Where are you is what I'm asking, just so I can make sure that you've all got a hold of the Q&A section. We've got all over the place. Jesse, Pittsburgh, yay. So you can agree with me. Hamilton, Canada. Erica, I was born about 30 miles north of there in a small town called Fergus, Ontario. So welcome. We've got a lot of Hamiltons, the steel capital of Canada. Welcome. Welcome, South Carolina. Great. Good to see everybody. And thank you for being here. Mine is a very, sorry.
Jeff, sorry to interrupt. I have good news that the chat is working. So,
oh, yay. Okay. All right. So then now it's up to you all to listen. And when we need to use the chat box, we'll use the chat box. And then your questions will go in the question and answer after when we get to questions. Perfect. I see it now. All right. So I want to tell you right up front that I am changing the name of the seminar just because I can. That's all. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about this, and I'm going to change the word difficult to critical, because what we're talking about today is not necessarily always hard to have conversations, but something that's urgent that may get us outside our comfort zone a little bit. It might be managing up in your case. I understand that, like so many industries that I've worked with over the past 25 years, young professionals in the world of steel are entering, more managerial roles because of age gaps in the workplace. A critical conversation might just be to ask for a raise or a promotion, but it also might involve a poor job performance or even misconduct at work. You need to be prepared, whether it's blue collar to white collar, management to operator, or any combination of that. And by the way, I am not organized. So some of you might have been looking for a handout prior to this. I actually have handouts for you. They're sitting right here on my desk. And if you want to come by my office and pick one up, no, I'm only kidding. I will get a copy of the slides to Lauren, if that's okay with her, to get out to all of you after the presentation today. So what is a critical conversation? The definition that I have here, is a critical conversation is simply known as a difficult conversation. It's a discussion where stakes are generally high, not always, but opinions probably vary, emotions probably run strongly, and can lead to strained relationships or negative outcomes if handled improperly. But let's just talk quickly and get it out of the way about the hard truths about challenging conversations. You know, basically, it can consume our thoughts. Kelsey and Lauren both kind of alluded to the fact that we avoid, many of us anyway, avoid those critical conversations with our significant other, with colleagues, and especially if you're managing up. It just consumes our thoughts, and we really have to just do it and do it quickly. It can interfere with our work, our productivity, increases stress for sure. Workplace relationships and trust are often the first to be impacted. And the cost of communication can be alarming. People spend a great deal of their time sorting out the miscommunication, clarifying assumptions, which we're going to talk a lot about today, and getting the situation back on track. So it's important, I think, to have these skills. Last year, we talked about, advanced communication skills, but we didn't address this area specifically. So in the chat box, would you share just a word that comes to mind when you think of critical conversations and conflict? What's one word that comes to mind for you? Awkward. Yes, Liz. Thank you. Hard. Trouble. Uncomfortable. Scary. Absolutely. Uncomfortable. Anxiety, stress, intimidating. See, none of you put fun. None of you put can't wait. And of course not, because we just don't know. Oh, and thank you. I think it's Jaiwan. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but that's where I was going, is we don't know the outcome. And when we don't know the outcome, what happens? We're out of control. We lose control. And as human beings, we prefer that control. And because we don't know the outcome, it is scary. It is we do avoid it's intimidating. All those things that you said. So hopefully I can give you some tools today to help you kind of avoid some of those feelings. So basically, understand as we get into this that our thoughts dictate our actions. And by the way, if you see me looking at another screen, I have chat on one screen, I have my slides on another. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to get to both. Our perspective is what I'm saying is really how we communicate. I know I shared this last time we were together, but there's a saying I once heard a sales trainer saying, and I don't remember the specific situations many years ago, but they said, if you see the world through your customer's eyes, you'll see the way your customer buys. I love that because, we're not here for sales training, obviously, but we're looking at how we think about critical conversations, our viewpoint, and their viewpoint as well. And that shapes the language we use, how we utilize nonverbal communication, how we process that. What we think about shapes how we act, how we respond, we behave. And finally, our perspective is like a lens we look through, and it shapes how we see things, how we act, and what results we achieve. So it's really about seeing the world from their perspective, not ours. And when we go in with that mindset, it changes the outcome of the conversation itself. So the question becomes, how can we shape those same four things? How we show up, how we communicate, our actions and behaviors, and the outcome of the results we achieve. Oops, sorry. So let's talk about conflict. And one of the things I want to say right from the start is that it's not always about conflict with you. You may be acting in the role almost as mediator between two other parties, but you still have to have that critical conversation, or at least get the parties together to participate in it. It's not always one-to-one. But when we talk about conflict, understand what I've got written up there is, conflict is not good or bad. It just is. It happens. It's about different perspectives. Conflict cannot be a contest. We choose whether or not to make it a game where there are winners and losers. Remember, see the world through your customer's eyes. The analogy I use is it's sort of like water. Too much water, and the result is flooding and so much damage to people and property. Too little water, and we're faced with drought and a barren landscape, absent of life and color. We need water to survive, just like we need an appropriate level of well-managed conflict to thrive and grow as individuals and groups. I like to say that conflict is necessary at work. And in the chat box, I'd like you to take a second, write down what's the difference between good conflict and bad conflict? No, don't write that down. Write down what you think is the difference between good conflict and bad conflict. I see proper communication, the outcome. Devin, you're getting close to what I think. Respect. Yes, respect is great. Productive versus further disagreements. Level of respect, intention, desired outcome. All of those are part of it. I love it. Progress versus stalemate. And Alexis, I'm going to push back a little bit on that because, we do there are times that we have those critical conversations, we come to a stalemate where we agree to disagree and still look at a way to move forward. So, resolution versus prolong the conflict. Yeah, that could be part of it. But what I definitely define it is that good conflict happens naturally. It's when it crosses the line and becomes personal that it becomes bad conflict. And that's crucial to understand when we're talking about difficult or critical conversations, is that we never want to cross that line where it becomes personal. I will share with you that my dad once said to me, don't take it so personally, take it seriously. I love that. I probably use it once a week. I tell myself, stop taking it personally, take it seriously. And when I do that, I never cross that line, even when I'm having a difficult conversation. You can't make it personal. You have to understand that conflict is that moment of truth in the relationship. It occurs when normal tensions take on some kind of an adversarial tone, not a bad thing necessarily, but when two or more people perceive that their underlying interests, their values, their expectations, their needs, their fears, are when they see those as mutually opposed, they take action within that perspective versus exploring common ground and shared interests. So it's your job in the conversation to make sure that we don't cross the line, and two, that you're discovering what are those underlying interests. I don't know if you knew, I understand or knew this, but most human beings have 64,000 thoughts. I looked this up that we're processing in any given minute. That's huge. So how do we show up in them? Our nonverbals introduce us before we even start talking. We'll talk more about nonverbal communication in a few minutes, but we communicate based on our mindset and thoughts. So decide in advance, how are you going to show up in the conversation? Hopefully you want to be professional, trustworthy, calm, regulated, respectful. Doesn't always happen that way. We have buttons, each one of us, that were installed when we were very young, and sometimes people push those buttons. But we'll talk about those emotions as well. So let's talk first about preparing for critical conversations. To me, believe it or not, I think this is the most crucial step of all the other steps. It's not when you're actually in the conversation. Sometimes that's too late. It's, are you prepared for the conversation? It says that preparing for critical conversations is an important but often overlooked step. Absolutely. So preparation means everything. The author of The Art of War, his name is Sun Tzu, I think, or Tzu, said, plan for what's difficult while it's easy. And that, I like that, because think about it. I think we need to plan for this conversation while it's still easy and before we get into the conversation itself. So I kind of alluded to the fact that it matters how we show up. And I want to spend just a little bit of time with that, because the first is when things go sideways. They're bound to go sideways in a lot of situations. I don't know if anyone plays golf out there, but and probably what a mulligan is. Well, relationship mulligans are the do-overs, right? If you say something wrong or it didn't land well, then you can own it, fix it, and move forward. But you need to be prepared going into the conversation. Secondly, our mindset shapes behaviors. We've mentioned that it shapes behaviors already. It shapes how we show up, how we communicate, how we manage emotions and interact with people. My suggestion is that you literally set aside a few minutes before you have that critical conversation, just to get in the right mindset. Even better, What I've done in the past is I've set aside time to actually practice the conversation with a friend or a trusted colleague or my wife. And I have them play devil's advocate. What's the worst case scenario and how would I respond? Next is clarify assumptions. Check on assumptions. They're generally they're incorrect, and acting on incorrect assumptions creates additional challenges just to get around. So why not address them when you're preparing? Those assumptions might be ours, it might be theirs. We'll talk about checking and clarifying with the other party or parties, but right now in preparation, we need to ask ourselves, what's my assumption going into this conversation? And then finally, nonverbal communication. Huge when we talk about critical conversations. Your nonverbal communication is being interpreted from the minute you start the conversation. It introduces you to a conversation really before you even start speaking. It's, is what you're saying matching how you're saying it and your intent? Okay, I tried this last year and I'm still going to repeat myself because it was a lot of fun and it proves the point. I know I can't see you, but I'm going to trust that you're going to participate. Would you all hold that newborn baby in your arms and don't drop it? Come on. You can even hold it like this if you want, but let's all do it together. And we're going to sing. Come on, sing out loud. We're going to sing Rockabye Baby, the fast version. And I do not have a good voice, so I apologize in advance, but it'll prove a point. Ready? Rockabye baby in the treetops. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all. Shh, baby's sleeping. What's with that? Have you ever thought about the words that we use? Rockabye baby, we're going to put you in a tree. Why we're putting you up there is a mystery to me. The wind's going to blow like a hurricane or a tornado. The branch you're on is going to break. You're going to fall and probably die. Good night. See, it almost has nothing to do with the words we use. Almost 100%. It's our nonverbal communication, our tone of voice, and our actions. That's what we have to consider when we go into that meeting. We'll talk more about. By the way, if you sung along or actually did that, thank you for being a good sport. I appreciate you. We'll talk more about non verbal communication later on in the webinar. So I wanted to share with you my 7 steps, if you will, or 7 tips to preparation. The first is determining what type of conversation is necessary to address the issue. Also, is it going to be in phone? Is it going to be virtual? When it'll take place? Where is it going to take place? The right time and place is an important consideration and impacts how the conversation turns out. As a matter of fact, one of the things that goes with this step is thinking to yourself, how long can I leave the situation before it's addressed? Is it something that needs to be addressed right now? Well, shorter time to prepare, but I'm still asking you to do some preparation. The second step is determine who needs to be involved in the conversation and make sure that everyone's in agreement who needs to be there. The third step, determine your BATNA and your WATNA. I know. I happen to make up a lot of acronyms, but you know what? I also know in the steel industry, you've got a lot as well. BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The WATNA is the opposite. It's the worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. So essentially what we mean is what's the best outcome that can happen and what's the worst outcome that can happen? You have to ask yourself, I like to think of it as a spectrum. Best outcome on the left, worst outcome on the right. And I actually go through and say, what would that best outcome be? What would the worst outcome be? And what could be right in the middle that I would at least settle for? So again, BATNA and WATNA. And once again, I'll remind you, I'm going to send these slides to you. So if you're making copious notes, you don't need to. Number 4 is another acronym. Check your FAFs. This one I didn't make up. I've known it for many years. It's differentiating between facts, assumptions, and feelings, FAFs. It's so essential for respect and psychologically safe situations. Just be aware of your unconscious biases. And I don't know if you've done any work in unconscious bias, but basically what it is and I'll explain in a minute, are all those biases that we don't even recognize in ourselves until they flare up, sometimes in conversation or just in something that we're doing. Next is think in advance of the opening. You know, who, what, where, when, why, and how, of those open questions that you're going to ask. Practice them out loud if you can, in front of a mirror. Record yourself, or like I said before, get a trusted friend. Pay attention on how you sound, how you're coming across, and then adjust and just practice again. This builds skills and confidence in ourselves. Next, think in advance how you'll engage the other person in the conversation. What are some of the courtesies you can put in place just to ensure both of you are heard, that respected, and you can participate fully in the conversation. And then I like to say, create some conversation bookends. This has always helped me in any critical conversation. These are just 90 seconds, and the first 90 seconds and the last 90 seconds of the conversation. Again, it's not really a script, although you may want to learn it. Just practice how you'll open and close the meeting. And doing that, it shapes what happens in between those two bookends and the after effect. And I said there were only 7, but I want to give you a bonus one. And my bonus one is consider your environment. I think this is also crucial. You know, plan to take the person or people out of their usual environment. That's the first step. So, you know, if they're on the floor, the shop floor, we need to get them off the shop floor. Or maybe it's in your office, or we get them out of the hallway. The other thing is don't put a desk between you and them. One of the mistakes we make, especially if we're in a managerial position or supervisory position, is we always put a desk between us. You can't see it on the other side of my desk, even though I'm at home. I have 2 chairs. Sometimes I have clients come here and I have 2 chairs, and I always sit in one of those chairs versus sitting behind the desk. I just think it makes it more comfortable for the other person. And then ask yourself, is this better to have the conversation over coffee in the break room, or my office in private, or somewhere else, even off-site? Just remember, the environment really can have a huge impact on the results of a critical conversation. So my goal today is to make you a superhero when it comes to critical conversations. You'll officially be known as an assumption buster. I made that up, but I'm making you all assumption busters. We need to ask ourselves 5 questions, as you can see on the screen. You know, first is, how did I get the information? Was it rumor? Was it from only one of the involved parties? Was it third hand? How did I get it? The second is my assumption based on facts or information, feelings? Sometimes it's based on past history. So we've got to check that at the door. Next, as I said already before, put yourself in their shoes. And especially as you're preparing, ask yourself, what do I think they're thinking about the issue right now? How do I think they're going to show up? Fourth, write down what 3 questions you might ask the other person to make sure the assumption has been clarified. So, you know, things, as you can see, it might be, you know, I just want to check in with you. Let me make sure we're on the same page. Whatever it is, but you know, think about those 3 questions to help you clarify. And then last, ask yourself, what else? What else do I need to know before we have this conversation? What else don't I know to be prepared? And also, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and again, like I say, you'll get the slides, but I like to call them back pocket scripts. They're just questions and statements to guide you when you get stuck. To me, it's a cheat sheet that I'm going to send you. So I look at it in 4 different areas: validation, questions, statements, and emotional management. These are 4 things we kind of have to prepare for going into this conversation. So validation is just, I see it's really important to you. I understand. You really value ABC. And it's just, that's a check-in. And then there are questions. Can you tell me more about what matters most to you on this issue, just so I make sure that we address it. And by the way, let me just on an aside, I always am making notes during a critical conversation. I do ask permission to make notes right at the beginning. Is it okay if I take notes? Never had anybody say no. But I know that if I don't ask that, people are going to wonder why my attention's down on this piece of paper versus with them all the time. So you want to make some notes and maybe even have some notes of questions just to prompt you. So back to the questions, what matters most? Let's prioritize right now. What matters most? In statements, it's more like, let's find a solution that works for both of you or both of us. What I said didn't land as I intended, so let me try that again. I'm confident that we can come to a solution. These are statements. And then finally, emotional management, which we're going to talk a little more about in a couple of minutes. But one important one is taking breaks. It's interesting because my wife and I of 45 years, it's a long time, but she knows how to handle me, I guess would be a good word in a critical conversation. She'll often say, "Here's the issue. I know you need time to think about it. Let's take about an hour and then get together and talk about it." Because I need not only breaks, but I need time to upload in my mind. Otherwise, I speak off, knee-jerk reactions. So sometimes that's the issue as well. Not if people know they're going into a critical conversation, but taking breaks during the conversation might be a key as well. Looks like we're both getting a little overwhelmed. How about we take just a short 10-minute break and come back? There's a lot to take in. Can I sit with you? Can I sit with this for half an hour? It's hard for me to listen when emotions are so high. Whatever it is. So you've got validation, questions, statements, and emotional management. And hopefully some of this will prompt you when you get the slides for your next conversation. So this leads into another acronym, which is what I call the WIN method. And if this was the only thing that you remembered from today, this will help you in any given conversation. It basically says that when setting boundaries, you use the WIN approach. The W is when something happens. When you do that, when you do that, or when this event happened, it's a when statement. Next is the I, which is I. I feel, I notice, I observe, I find myself being. And then next is the need. So what I need from you is, or what I need in the future is, and then finally it's the outcome. What could happen if a boundary is not respected? If that happens again, this is what could happen. I have an example for you, I think, to clarify. And by the way, notice that for the most part, I'm using only I statements. As soon as you start to overuse you statements, it can become accusatory. And no, you don't want to say something like, I need you to. It's all about I statements and what I think. Here's an example. When you come to me at the last minute, I find myself feeling, oh, by the way, there's the when. When you come to me at the last minute, I find myself feeling torn. I want to help you, and I sometimes can't work with your short timelines. I need, the N, more notice to be able to support you. If I don't get appropriate notice, I can't book in the time to support you, that natural outcome. So that's just an example of when. To me, I think I've stressed a lot, but I think this is the key to today's discussion. It's just an easy to use and easy to remember acronym that you can use in any conversation. It may not go in sequence. I want to stress that. You might say, when this happens, I notice that, and you get interrupted. Somebody says, well, that's not what happened. This happened. And so you may have to jump around a little, but just make sure that your conversation includes all four statements at some point. So, chat box time. How else can we prepare for critical conversations? A lot of you have had these. I don't assume that you've never had a critical conversation or a difficult conversation. How else do you prepare for them? Put it in the chat box. Devin. See, I knew you, Devin. Prayer. You see, I need to add that. That's a great one. Sure. Have a good night's rest. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Diet, sleep, exercise, all important before you. And wouldn't it be wonderful in an ideal world if we could do all that? Sometimes something happens now and we say, look, we need to address this right away. Give me half an hour to prepare. Well, you're not going to get much sleep in half an hour. So, but if you can clear your head, I tell people go for a walk before you have the conversation. I'd even suggest it to the other party, go for a walk before we have the conversation. Um, uh, there's a question here, Kyla, and that is when we know this is coming up, should we give the other person a heads up so they can also prep? Oh, without a doubt. Don't blindside them with a difficult conversation. You want to tell them, we really need to discuss this. When's a good time to get together to talk about, to have this conversation? So that should come in advance as well. Make bullet points of the points you want to make. These are all excellent ways to prepare for critical conversations. All right, so let's get into having the conversation itself. First, seek to understand. Obviously, you know what open-ended questions are. Tell me more about, help me understand. What are your thoughts? And you want to mirror to confirm feelings. Talk about that in a minute. Paraphrase to acknowledge and listen for what's not being said. So let's talk about those things. Excuse me for 1 second. First is seek first to understand. So this is continued kind of from the win conversation and assuming that they've told you their reasoning for doing or saying what they did. So you just check in. So I want to make sure I understand your perspective. And it's a clarification question. It allows them afterwards to say, no, that's not exactly my perspective. What I saw or what the reason that happened was. So it's a clarification question. Next, in asking open-ended questions, you want to keep doing this until you both agree that you're understanding the same thing. This may be the bulk of your entire conversation, just getting on the right page and clarifying. Be aware though of closed-ended questions. Those that a yes or no answer will suffice. People can become closed and disengaged if you ask too many closed-end questions. They think that you're not really interested in their explanation or their perspective. Here's one that I really encourage you to, outside your comfort zone, and I really encourage you to consider using. It's checking in, but including an emotional update. I used to do this with my kids all the time. So what I hear you saying is that you were really frustrated. There's the emotional check-in. That you were really frustrated when Sean didn't even ask your opinion. And they come back and say, no, I wasn't frustrated. I was really angry. I was upset. But at least you've checked in and it took the conversation one step deeper because you did check in with their emotions. Not just saying, so what I hear you saying is that you didn't, that Sean didn't even ask your opinion. That's factual. That's not a check-in. So include an emotion to check in with. And then paraphrase, which isn't the same as a check-in with an emotional update. This is factual. So just to make sure we're on the same page, you're telling me that Jamie was part of your team and that she didn't get the report done in time. So you also have to get the facts in there as well. But I always start with a check-in with an emotional update first to tell them that I'm listening, to take it that one step deeper. And then I start with questions about the facts. We talked a little bit about body language and nonverbal communication. You must be aware of nonverbal cues, both theirs and yours. During a critical conversation, use open and non-defensive body language. Maintain eye contact is probably something I don't need to tell you. And again, if it's virtual, sometimes this is difficult because yes, we're trying to maintain eye contact, and it should tell you that if you can have a critical conversation in person, it's much better than doing it on the phone, especially, or even on a Zoom call. And show engagement, nodding your head, saying things like, I understand, and appropriate facial expressions as well to foster more comfortable and productive dialogue. Your posture. Your posture has a lot to do with it. Avoid crossing your arms, which looks defensive, even if you're cold. All right. It can also signal that you're just not interested. It's a way to shut down the conversation. Instead, just maintain an open posture by keeping your arms relaxed and your shoulders down. Um, I mentioned facial expressions. Show genuine interest and empathy through appropriate facial, expressions. A little bit of a smile when appropriate, or a concerned brow, or depending on the context. I said eye contact. Just, it shows that you're engaged and that you're listening. And nodding when appropriate shows that you're listening as well. You know all these nonverbal cues, but sometimes we go in and we're so in our heads that we're not thinking about what our body is saying. So be aware. The second is active listening. This is something that goes along with body language, and you may say, what's that got to do with body language? It's part of our body, right? Just focus on what the other person's saying. If you're not familiar with what active listening is, rather than thinking about your response. Another statistic I once read is that human beings think, I think it was 200 times faster than the typical human being can speak. So while I'm talking, you're thinking about your response. You're thinking about, in this case, you're thinking about what I'm not saying right now. So make sure that you are, staying with that person. Even in preparation, you should tell yourself, I'm going to, no matter the distractions, no matter what's happening, I'm going to listen to that person only. I already said ask open-ended questions, reflect and paraphrase. And if you can, avoid interrupting the other speaker, but it's not mandatory. Sometimes we have to interrupt just to clarify. They're in the middle and they say, oh, wait, slow down for 1 second. Let me just clarify for a second. That to me is an interruption to continue the conversation or down the right path, versus just interrupting to be to hear yourself talk or get your point made. And the third is our tone of voice. Remember back to Rockabye Baby? Yes, it had mostly to do with our body language, but it also had to do with our tone of voice. Not sure if if you were with me last year, we actually talked about this, that there's a thing called mirroring and imaging. Mirroring is mirroring their body language. So it's a little tough, because if they're sitting there with their arms crossed or their legs crossed and you do the same thing, it starts to establish rapport. But most importantly, with a critical conversation, we need to match their tone of voice. And I know this is going to sound, again, uncomfortable and awkward, but I'm telling you that it works. As a matter of fact, if body language, tone of voice, and the words we use were 100% of our communication effectiveness, body language is 60%, tone of voice is 30%. The words we use are only 10%. So that's how important our tone of voice is. And matching their tone of voice just at the beginning of the conversation or when they get upset. So their tone of voice goes up because they're upset. You don't understand. Every time I've done this, Bob has done this. And if you're willing, match their tone of voice. I do understand, but here's what we're trying to, so it just matches where they are and brings them to a level at which you can work together. I do understand. But let's just talk about where we go from whatever it is. So it's matching that tone of voice. And then also, speak at a moderate pace. I tend to talk quickly, as you can tell already. And it's a downfall in critical conversations for me. People will say to me, slow down, hold on, I didn't catch what you just said. So again, in preparation, I have to tell myself that mindset. I have to tell myself, take it slow. Allow yourself to pause, let the other person think, give them time to process what you're saying. So even ask them, do you need a couple seconds just to process what I'm talking about? So I'm going to check in right now. This is not the end of the webinar by any means. We've got a lot more, but I know I'm throwing a lot at you. In the chat box, what's one new thing or one idea that we've talked about so far that you find useful? One thing. And if nothing comes up, I'm in big trouble. So one thing. Making notes. Thank you, Devin. I think that was your idea. Considering the other person's perspective, see the world from their perspective, not ours. Tone matching, something I just said. Thank you. Matching other people's energy, which we really didn't talk about. That takes, I think, precedence over everything else. Is what is their energy what energy did they bring to the room? Um, yeah. Sorry, not putting a desk between yourselves when talking. The 5 questions. Thank you. FAFs. Thanks very much. Conversation bookends. I happen to love those. Just the beginning, it gives me a sense of a little bit of control, Jessica. So, no, I'm sorry, who said that? Anyway, it gives me a little sense of control. It was Christopher. Just knowing that this is how we're going to start and this is how I'm going to end. And so I don't know what's going to happen in between, but I got that down pat. So thank you for that. And win statements. Perfect. So I'm hoping that you're taking something away from the conversation. And remember, if you have a question, please just write it down or put it in the Q&A, and we'll get to it hopefully at the end. All right, let's keep going. So next, one of the things I wanted to address, because I know that you face this as young professionals, is what about those critical conversations with older colleagues, with colleagues who have more experience than us? Maybe there's misery loves company, but I will tell you that the most frequent question I get from new managers I work with around the world is, how do I manage, coach, deal with team members or colleagues who are more experienced and know more than me? You know, this question arises from an outdated notion, and you can tell by my gray hair, I've been around a long time, but we used to think that in order for a team, as someone to lead a team, you have to know more, have achieved more, and in many ways be clearly superior to everyone else in the team. And that's a myth. You know, unless you're the owner's son or daughter, and some of you might be, you only earn the right to lead by putting in the required years, learning everything that there is to learn. This is part of the myth. Well, that model arguably worked, you know, when I started working many years ago. It really has become irrelevant in today's context, unless you're working with people my age. There's the but, right? The complexity and fluid boundaries of modern organizations, rapidly evolving business models, knowledge, intensive nature of work, and the idea of sharing the responsibilities, hopefully it makes that kind of a worthless notion. Now, I say that, but certain industries like steel still have the TTWWADI mentality, some people, and that stands for that's the way we've always done it, right? But that's the way we've always done it. Yet, if this myth persists, and younger managers, especially in the more mature sectors of the steel industry, often struggle with this question of how do we, you know, work with older colleagues. So I want to address it right away. The first is you have to set clear expectations. And while that's important for all managers, it can be especially useful when you're leading a team with people who do know more than you do, and are more skilled than you are. It's almost that vulnerability that we didn't allow in my time. When I started work, leaders did not allow any vulnerability or admit that they didn't know something. Sometimes they would say, you know, I don't know it, let me get the answer. That was good. But in most cases, you know, fake it till you make it kind of thing. But in this situation, you can't rely on your knowledge or experience to allocate work appropriately, to set goals, intervene when there's a problem or conflict, unless, you know, unless you have clear expectations. So agreeing on clear and measurable outcomes, adopting a set of data backed in performance standards, whatever it is, it just allows a manager to get the best out of their people on their team. The second thing is asking the right questions. This is not just, and by the way, this is not just for critical conversations. This is in general. I learned from one of my early mentors that as a leader, asking the right questions was more important than knowing the answers. Say that again. Asking the right questions was more important than knowing the answers. from him and subsequently a number of other outstanding managers that I had at the beginning of my career, I saw that it was easy to manage and evaluate any team member's performance, even if I knew next to nothing about their area of expertise, as long as I knew the right questions to ask them. Again, it goes back to preparation. Maybe we say to ourselves, I'm gonna do less than 50% of the talking. That's tough. There's only one way to do that, and that's to ask questions. But how do you know what questions to ask? Some obvious sources are your supervisor, your predecessor, a peer, if you have one, a mentor, if you have a mentor. But there's an even easier way. You can ask your team members to come up with the most relevant questions that they want you to ask them when evaluating their performance, not necessarily in a critical conversation. But imagine that. It just struck me that I'm in this critical conversation and I start by saying, what question, or I finish by saying, what questions haven't I asked you that I should have? I like that. It opens it up. It allows them to sort of vent any questions they think you should have asked. But if you put in a little effort and use a couple of different sources to come up with and validate those questions, I think you set yourself up for success in managing a high performance team. The next, of course, is start now by giving regular feedback. In other words, when it comes to a critical conversation, this isn't the first time that we've had a conversation like this or that I've given you feedback. A younger manager I work with one of my clients mentioned to me, and it clicked because I knew I was going to be doing this webinar, that one of her team members was often correcting her and punching holes in every argument in her facts, and argued with her all the time in the presence of the manager supervisor and other senior stakeholders. This client was concerned that it was negatively affecting her credibility with her people. So I asked, have you given that person feedback in this regard? She said, no. I tried speaking to him about this once, and he said that it was not his intention, and we moved on to other topics. Well, it seemed to me that she hadn't moved on. It was something that she resented and was likely affecting her relationship with this team member, which is completely avoidable because rather than keep it bottled inside and then reacting excessively once her patience wore thin or her stakeholders actually asked or questioned her credibility, she could provide timely feedback all the time. And then I suggested this to her and she said, well, what if he doesn't like it? He's very senior and an important member of the team. I said, all the more reason to address it early, before it becomes a significant problem. So don't let seniority or perceived importance or what will he think stop you from giving people feedback. Also, give feedback immediately when it's required. Don't wait, don't let it fester, or else it'll develop into a major issue. And then finally, delegate. I think that delegate, don't abdicate. What I mean by two of the most common mistakes that less experienced managers make that I see when it comes to delegation are not delegating enough or overdoing it. So there is a balance. The impact of not delegating enough manifests quickly. Most often it shows up as the manager just has a bottleneck of some kind. The symptoms of over delegation, you can imagine, are less easy to spot, but if a team member has a lot of very experienced people, the consequences of what I put abdication of authority can be really serious, as you can imagine. As a manager, it's just important you get delegation right. Both under delegation and abdication can really impact your effectiveness, your credibility, and eventually the growth in the organization. All right, I wanted to kind of throw that in as a separate piece. It has a lot more to do with managing than critical conversations, but some of these, when applied to a critical conversation, can be effective as well. So let's move on to handling resistance and conflict. Workplace conflicts we talked about before can be healthy, but they can also sap energy from any conversation or situation. You need to address issues quickly and effectively and help prevent them from occurring again. It's really critical to move forward. You know, it's estimated that managers spend about 40% of their time dealing with conflicts, both big and small. So it's not a trivial matter. It's a fact of work life. Disagreements, disputes, and honest differences exist everywhere. And for you in the steel business, I think that by treating conflicts as catalysts for increasing energy and productivity, a positive thing, you can turn them from negative to positive. So what if we reframed how we look at conflict? This, I think, is a great example. How we think about critical conversations and conflict shapes how we deal with it. Number one is my favorite go-to. It's just a conversation. It's not meant to be a conflict, or we're not or to be taken personally. Number two is I have the skills, and hopefully after today you have more skills. And number three is it's an opportunity. See it and even present it to the other person. This is an opportunity for us to resolve this together versus just one of us trying to fix it. Fourth, it's a chance to understand one another. I feel like we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I want to have this conversation so I can better understand not only the situation, but better understand you as well. And number five, go in thinking a resolution is possible. I know I have could be, but I go in thinking, yes, we can resolve this. And number six, influence 50% of what happens. Just what I said. Not only do 50% of the only do 50% of the speaking, but because it's a shared conversation, then I can influence about 50% of what happens. So I developed this five-step five-step conflict resolution model, which I can't seem to get to the next slide. There we go. Set the stage for respectful conversation. Number two, define the issue to be discussed. Three, explore expectations, perceptions, interests. Four, determine options. And five is follow-up. So let's look at each of these. First, setting the stage. I already told you we need to prepare for the conversation. We need to practice, right time, right place, talk about courtesies, and use the conversation bookend. That was in preparation. Define the issue to be discussed. So agree with the other person on what needs to be discussed. If you can do this in advance, it makes it even easier. It's almost like an agenda. And I like to, when I have the conversation with someone, and again, I try to do it, even if it's virtual, I try to do it face to face. The conversation, sorry, not the critical conversation, but setting up the critical conversation. Jane, we need to talk about this. I wanted to get some time on your calendar. When are you available? And I just want, before we hang up, I just want to agree on the issues that we're going to discuss. So be prepared for that as well. Deal with one issue at a time. You can even have them on that paper that I told you, on that pad that I told you to have with you, and then have them written down and say, you know what, let's try and stay in order of the issues we talked about and keep the conversation going, almost like an agenda. And then think of this part of the roadmap as setting the agenda. It's just to create a sense of structure and focus. Number three was explore perceptions and interests. This is where the discussion happens, underlying interest. In this step, you're sharing your perspectives, asking open-ended questions, and imagine it as an iceberg. What you need to uncover to resolve the issues is like the part of the iceberg that's below the surface of the water. All you're seeing is above the surface when you walk in, but there's a lot we got to discover below the surface. It looks something like this, right? Getting beyond positions to interests and common ground. 25% is the position. It's where we go in head to head, or how we feel. Very little of what is actually going on is known to us. That other 75% are underlying interests. Their concerns, the other person's hopes, their expectations, their beliefs. What are they afraid of? What do they need from this? These are all things you have to consider. Yes, it's a lot of work. And fourth, determine options and agreement. This is the brainstorming process. Once we get everything out on the table, we can literally say, okay, let's work together, let's brainstorm and just talk about what would, in an ideal world, what would the optimal solution be that would work best for both of us. Confirm the agreement when you come to it. That's the key. And make sure you identify next steps. Clarify and clarification and commitment is a key here before you end the conversation. So let me clarify and let's talk about what the next steps are that we agreed to. Go through them again, even if you just talked about them. And number 5 is the follow-up. This is where I think most people lag, if you will. They don't follow up. Before concluding the conversation, make sure that there's a follow-up plan with dates, times, specifics. So let's make a plan to get back together in exactly a month. Let's look at our calendars now and put it on our calendars. Whatever it is, just to check in to make sure that what we talked about is happening. End the conversation always with appreciation and commitment to the resolution on your behalf as well. Make sure that you have a plan in place to manage your emotions, self-regulation after the stressful conversation. And I want to stop here because this is about caring for yourself before and after. I love the idea that somebody said, go for a walk, take a break, whatever it was. That's self-care. And a stressful conversation, as you know, be prepared that it's going to be stressful. And so make preparations for yourself for afterwards. After this conversation, I am not going to schedule another meeting today or in the 2 hours following, or I am going to schedule some time just to be in quiet time by myself. Whatever it is, self-care is incredibly important. And then finally, rebuilding trust and relationships takes time. So that may take time with that other person. You make sure that your actions afterwards support the relationship and the trust building that hopefully you've started during the conversation. So that's the 5 steps. And technology is great when it works. There we go. There are the 5 steps. And again, I think that it's just something else to keep in the back of your mind. So what makes conversations go sideways? The challenges right there, I've got 6 different challenges. On the left, we may have history with this person, right? And so that's always a challenge going into the conversation. And it should be addressed as well, somewhere at the beginning of the conversation. Lay your cards on the table. John, I know we have history in the past. Let's just, be here, be now, be present. Don't just be here. Second is that we might have different communication skills. I don't know if anybody has ever done any work in behavioral styles or personality assessments, Myers-Briggs and DISC and colors. And this is really helpful, to kind of think back to if you have done any of that work, what is their style? What do they need from me to adapt to their style? The third there is one's communication and conflict resolution skills can create challenges. So they don't have this course. They don't have your skills that you're going to have for critical conversations. So you need to give them some leeway that they're not as adept at communicating or at conflict resolution as you might be. On the other side, we have assumptions. We've talked about those. Rumors. Rumors are a huge obstacle to a successful conversation. Rumors and gossip are challenging, and sometimes it's hard to ignore them because that's what we've been hearing and that's playing in our heads. So we've got to at least address them to ourselves before we walk into the conversation. And emotions. Emotional regulation is key. I think that the person who loses their temper loses. Period. And again, it's not win-lose, but in my mind, in a negotiation, somebody loses their temper, that's a sign of weakness. So no matter what happens, no matter if the other person loses their temper, you need to, think about your emotional cadence, if you will. It's so important to be self-aware throughout the conversations about with your emotions. When your battery gets low, you charge it. So when your resilience gets low, you need to recharge it too. And that slide is actually out of order because that was supposed to be after self-care. I think self-care is like plugging your phone in, something that you just always need to keep doing. So strategies to start practicing all this today. I've got 8. If you took away 1 or 2, that would be great. Yeah. think about opportunities to advance the conversation or the situation. Model and build accountability. The second one, ask open-ended questions, listen to understand. Deal with the little pebbles and provide feedback throughout the year, not just at let's say performance reviews or critical conversations. Make sure that you've got the right time, right place. To protect your time, your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. The other person might want to talk right now, and you need to say, you know what, I just need time to process this, Bill. Let's take an hour, whatever it is you think you need. The fifth is that win method for setting boundaries, and that those back pocket scripts, or the cheat sheet, as I like to call it. Number 6 is review and learn from situations and practical application. 7, communication skills and commitment to holding yourself accountable. Just remind yourself with respect. Again, that's self-care. And remember, practice makes permanent. Commit to doing your best you're going to slip up. You're going to mess up, I like to say. So mess up and dress up. What does that mean? Admit you messed up and then figure out how to fix it. How to, dress it up and readdress it, or look at it and readdress it. So I'm asking you to make a 60-day commitment. In the chat box, would you share your ahas for the whole learnings and takeaways? Actually, this is backwards. Before you do that, would you just take a couple minutes? I'm going to just give you 2 minutes to write down a 60-day commitment as it relates to critical conversations and what we've talked about today. Write down, in the next 60 days, I will, and make one commitment. So I'm going to put this on a timer and give you just 2 minutes. Okay, it's probably less than 2 minutes, but awkward silence on a webinar. So if you've written down your 60-day commitment now, will you share it? Thank you, Zoe, already. And Tiffany, in answer to your question, yes, yes, yes. You will get a copy of the slides through Lauren immediately. Well, whenever she gets them to you, I will get them to her right after this webinar. Zoe, thank you for sharing. Well, somebody else shared too, but Zoe says, in the next 60 days, I will work on staying grounded and recognize emotional dysregulation when and probably if conflict, and when in conflict, and actively step away for an agreed period of time. Excellent. Thank you for that. Anybody else brave enough? Be more aware of nonverbal cues. Thank you, Jesse. Yeah, during conversation. Absolutely. Any others? By the way, I'm repeating these because I'm not sure if in the recording they'll show up. So I want to make sure that people know. If you don't want to share your 60-day commitment, will you share one aha different than you did before? If you shared one key takeaway from today? Consider and create a plan for approaching critical conversations, incorporating points from this talk. Yay, Brandon. Thank you. Yes, thanks. Not to take things personally, but seriously. Thank you, Devin. My dad's advice lives on. All right. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to ask Kelsey and Lauren to come back. One last one. Brandy said to recommend a break in the conversation when it gets escalated. I love these. Thank you so much. So let's, I don't know if there are any questions, and if you want to ask a question, please, please, please just put it in the Q&A and we'll get to it. Lauren, Kelsey.
I can start you off with one.
Okay.
So there's an inevitability that you end up with people that you're going to have these critical conversations with that may not take it as seriously, or might take it more seriously than you are. In those cases where emotions are very high, how do you handle staying calm when the emotions run high?
Yeah.
How do you handle navigating their emotions to keep the conversation moving forward?
Great question. I'm glad you said navigating and not controlling their emotions. We can't control their emotions, only ours, right? And it is about navigating. So again, I'm huge on breath work. And so even in a conversation, it's about pausing, taking a deep breath before I respond. Even verbally saying to the other person, give me 10 seconds to think about this, you know? And again, it's avoiding that knee-jerk reaction. Using neutral language to avoid escalating tensions. So no blaming, using I statements is key, focusing mostly on facts, not on a person's feelings. Maybe, that sounds opposite to what I said about a emotional check-in. I'm just checking in to see how you're feeling. But when you're speaking, it's more about neutral language and focusing on the facts. I think also, we have to practice self-awareness and just recognizing what our emotional triggers are. The more aware of those that we are, the more likely we're not to get triggered if that happens in a conversation. And like I said before, and a lot of people picked up on that, take a break, regroup, before continuing the conversation. Can I just share Erica's aha moment was thinking about the other person and giving them warning and a chance to also prepare for the conversation. Yeah. A lot of us kind of not intentionally, but we blindside the other person. So thank you for that. She also said in the past, she was more focused on her own discomfort and preparation. Yeah, see the world from their perspective. Excuse me. Any others, Kelsey?
We have one here from Jesse.
Mhm.
Asks how to deal with someone who cherry picks information of what they want to hear and struggles with active listening.
Yeah, well, tell them they're wrong and walk away. No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, this happens a lot. They don't hear everything, and so that's why you have to be prepared with the facts. When it gets into emotions, then we're in trouble because we can only guess emotions, but facts are facts. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Jane, but here are the facts. Number one, this happened. Number two, this happened. Number three, this happened. And so there's no arguing. So that's part of the preparation. Again, I know a lot of people who do that, cherry pick, and they kind of focus on what they want to focus on, but they can't argue with the facts, as any attorney will tell you. Not that I am one, but focus on the facts, not emotions. Does it say we've got something from Craig there? Sorry. I guess it's in chat. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying
The
to
fast don't support.
support your
Oh,
statement.
I think that's supposed to say facts. If you say
Yeah.
fast, they'll certainly keep them on their toes. Thank you for that. Other questions?
Another one here says, how can you recover from a critical conversation that didn't go well?
Yeah. And first of all, I'm glad that somebody recognizes that they don't all go well, right? And it's okay to say, we agree to disagree, but we still have to figure something out moving forward. And that something that you figure out might be we're going to meet again next week, and continue the conversation. But I'm going to get, this other person involved if that's okay with you, because I think that they could help us in this conversation. So I think you need to reflect. and you need to do this no matter what after a conversation. Reflect on what went well, what could have been improved. This will also help you for future conversations with other people, but also help you think about, what went wrong. Follow up. Well, part of the follow up with the other person should be to just acknowledge that there were misunderstandings, and I want to make sure that we got them out in the open, and that we're going to get together in a week, and this is how this is what's going to happen. And if necessary, apologize. I'm sorry. But the key is, don't just apologize, kind of reaffirm your intent to find that solution. So it's not just, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, but I am committed to finding a solution to this. And that's why we're going to meet next week again. And then, if needed, like I said, it just involve a neutral third party. Because if you spend all that time and you still didn't come to a solution, sometimes it's good to get somebody else's perspective. And sometimes it asks them who they want that third party to be. I think we need to get a neutral third party. I'm going to ask you, who do you want in there? It's tough to do. You put yourself on the line because that third person could have, their best friend has the same perspective and wants to protect them, but again, it depends on the situation.
Are there any other escalation techniques that you would suggest? I know that's not totally not moving it up or escalating it, but maybe trying a different approach. Do you have any other escalation or other approaches when it doesn't work?
I think you mean de-escalation. I don't think you want
Both.
to escalate. But you want to escalate it to someone else? Yes. So depending on how you're using the word.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a acceptable conclusion and solution. Is that, what I'm glad we got here to this point. It's really beyond my my scope at this point. So what I'd like to do is arrange for you and Jane to sit down and kind of continue the conversation. I'll fill her in on where we are. And so, yes, escalate it to someone, in a higher position. That's a solution. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not a case of de-escalation. So, any others?
How do cultural differences impact critical conversations, and how can you navigate them?
Ooh.
Especially when it comes to an age gap industry where there is some differences in between the folks that are having these conversations potentially.
Yeah, it can be age, it can be experience. Different cultures too have varying communication styles. Some are direct, some are indirect. And I know that in your industry as well, and I know it especially in Canada, where I'm originally from, that diversity issue, and I don't want to get into diversity and inclusion at this point, but the diversity issue in conversations often rears its head. And so we have to be aware and empathize with different cultures and how they typically interact. But being mindful of just that, what we talked about, tone, body language, the words we use, being mindful of hierarchical sensitivities, that you have to talk to this person and it's like managing up, right? You have to have this conversation and being respectful of their position. Showing them that respect by asking a lot of questions instead of making assumptions, and then work off the facts. And finally, I'd say, approach your or kind of adapt your approach based on the individual's comfort level with confrontation. And either this because you work with them a lot, or you'll find out during the beginning stages of the conversation. And another thing that I haven't mentioned is allow enough time for the conversation. I can't tell you how many times people have said, we had the conversation, but we had to end it because, we didn't allow enough time. You have to allow enough time. I don't know what enough means in any given situation, but better to have too much time on your calendar than not enough. So make sure that both parties or all parties have enough time. I didn't mention my wife is a professional mediator, a workplace mediator. And timing is everything. She starts the mediation by saying, this may take all day. Have you cleared? And they were told that, have you cleared your calendars for the day? Sometimes it takes 20 minutes, but everyone has cleared their calendars. So timing, and you have to agree on the timing as well. So I talked about a lot of different things there. Anything else?
Does anybody else have any final questions?
Well, let me just say thank you to everybody. I want to tell everybody that my email is on my screen for my name. So please, 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 I really encourage you, if you have questions after we're done, after you get the slides, if you're going into a critical conversation and just want to have a email conversation about, how to handle things, I'm available to everybody. So thank you so much for having me back. I'd love to come back a third year. I'm not pushing my luck, but thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to Lauren and Kelsey.
Well, quickly, we have one more question if
No.
you're willing to.
Yes.
Devin asks, how do you think the managerial job description has shifted over the years, especially as older managers are retiring? This will be our last question,
Whoa.
especially in the steel industry.
So why don't we do that as the next topic for next year? Because that's a big So I think it shifted. And of course, I'm a baby boomer looking at this, but I love where it's gone. It's less hierarchical. It's more team-based. It's less, I would say less myopic, but I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. It's more, I speak for a living and I can't think of the words, but I think that it's more open to you doing your job and coming back and telling me versus macromanaging. Sorry. So it's less micromanaging like it used to be, or at least depending on the situation, and more macromanaging, project driven, and I think there's more of a base now of trust. And we have to build that trust, obviously, with our colleagues as a manager. But once you feel you've got that trust base, it's much easier to say, it's not, I'm not micromanaging, and I'm not, if I don't know everyone's situation, but for me, there's not really a time clock. You got to get your job, you get your work done and get it work done well. It's also about engagement. I think that managers nowadays are more prepared or more aware of employee engagement and how to keep people engaged. Whereas when I started work, it wasn't even an issue. People, they didn't really even care if you were engaged, just do your job. And that's a mentality sometimes of baby boomers and older, more experienced workers. I'm the best at what I do. What more do you want? Right. And so it's how do we keep them engaged?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. I just want to close out our session here with a reminder for all the YPs. Sharing my screen again. Well, actually, let me just take this opportunity to say quickly, thank you to Kelsey for moderating our discussion today. And of course, thank you for Jeff for coming back and delivering another wonderful session and sharing your wisdom with all of us. We really appreciate it. And of course, thank you to all of the YPs who joined us this afternoon. We truly appreciate you spending your valuable time with us and don't take that for granted. Before we conclude, though, I just want to give a little PSA about some exciting YP events we have coming up. I hope, or I'm sure by now, you have your calendars marked for AIS Tech in Nashville this May 5th to the 8th. We're actually going to be hosting an all-new Young Professionals Development Program on Sunday, May 4th, before the conference begins. Traditionally, this is the time slot where we host our Young Professionals Roundtable, some of you might be familiar with. However, since we have now launched official Young Professionals Membership Committee and its subcommittees, those platforms have really become where the place where we exchange ideas and provide support to our young steel professionals. So that's what we used to use the roundtable for. And because we have those groups, we're offering 2 soft skills training programs during AIS Tech at this time. So our 2 programs are going to run concurrently on Sunday, May 4th, meaning we'll have 2 separate programs run from 3 to 4. We'll be breaking for 15 minutes, and those exact 2 sessions will repeat for another hour to a different audience from 4:15 to 5:15. We'll have a maximum of 50 spots per session. So we're keeping the environment pretty intimate, similar to what we used to do with the roundtable. What we'll be introducing a different training style. So our first program that we'll be offering at AIS Tech on the 4th is a Steel Industry Leader Panel. As you can see here, titled Own Your Path, Navigating Challenges, Embracing Growth, and Finding Balance. This panel is going to explore how YPs can identify opportunities, find mentors, and pursue impactful projects. Our panelists will share strategies on thriving in stretch roles and turning setbacks into stepping stones towards success. Little tongue twister there. But the discussion is going to provide hopefully some actionable insights to help you build your careers, as well as equip you with tools to chart your paths. We have a rock star lineup of panelists that I couldn't be more excited about. We'll have Al Baer with us, Executive VP with Nucor, Mark Fedor, President and CEO of Morgan Engineering, Tracy Forrester, Executive VP of Environmental and Sustainability with Cleveland Cliffs, and Barry Schneider, President and COO of Steel Dynamics. So that's program number 1 at AIS Tech. And then our second program is a soft skills training titled Networking, the Secret Sauce of Career Success. We've hired professional speaker Jamie Lewis Smith to deliver this workshop. I personally don't think that there's a more fitting topic than networking right before heading into a week of our conference. So I'm particularly excited about this one as well. Through hands-on exercises, group discussions, and practical tips, you'll learn how to build meaningful workplace relationships, navigate networking events with confidence, aka AIS Tech, and create lasting impressions. So this session will equip you with the tools and strategies to make networking your career superpower. So there's going to be a small fee to participate in each session, $15 for members, $25 for non-members. Invitations to sign up for these 2 programs will be sent out to everyone who's registered for AIS Tech that is age 35 and under. So those invites to register for this will be sent out shortly, hopefully in the next week or 2. Please keep an eye out for that. It'll come from me through your inbox. Reminder, there is only 50 spots available per session, and it's first come, first serve. We definitely expect these will sell out pretty quickly. So if you want to sign up, I encourage you to jump on that fast. After the conclusion of our second session there, we're going to be inviting all participants to join us for a reception to connect with your peers, as well as the participants of the Women in Steel Development programs that'll be going on at the same time. And yeah, as I mentioned, please just keep a lookout for those invitations to register. You can find more information on these 2 programs on our website. We're really thrilled about being able to offer these to our young professionals this year, and hope you take advantage of these valuable lessons and insights. So thank you again for everybody's time this afternoon. That's it for today. When you do close out of our webinar, you'll be invited to take a short survey. So if you have a second, please answer a couple questions. We really appreciate your feedback to help us improve on our future events. Thank you again for tuning in, and I hope to see you all in Nashville. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.